Picture this. You're in front of your latest prospect, closing the biggest deal of your life. Your pitch decks were perfect. Your scripts, flawless. And when the time came to answer the golden question of, are you ready to move forward? Nothing happened. For everyone who loves sales, this is their worst nightmare. But fear not, because in this podcast, we're unraveling the enigma behind those missed opportunities. From appointments that evaporate to presentations that felt like a Broadway show but ended in awkward silence, we're dissecting it all. Welcome to Love Your Sales.
This podcast is presented by GenHead. GenHead leverages AI so small and medium-sized businesses can find their ideal clients to make more sales. Other companies talk about AI, but we are using it every day to drive down marketing costs and increase revenue. Learn more at genhead.com. That's genhead.com.
Welcome to another episode of Love Your Sales. I am so thrilled today. I am joined by Chanel Rose. She is a trailblazer in the world of business development and philanthropy with 15 years of experience under her belt. She's been a powerful force as both a political campaign manager and a fundraising director. And with her skills as a successful business developer and consultant, she has been sought after by companies and organizations around the globe. Today, Rose is a proud owner of CR Agency LLC, an international consulting firm that specializes in helping businesses and organizations develop strategies for growth and long-term success. Her wealth and knowledge and expertise has been honed through a diverse range of expertise, including time spent in politics, large member organizations, financial services, and many other industries. But Rose's credentials don't stop there. She's also a certified in project management and leadership development from Northwestern University in Chicago and has earned a business analytics certification from the Harvard University in Boston. These qualifications, combined with her hands-on experience, make her a valuable asset to any organization looking to make a real impact. Whether you're a business looking to expand or an organization looking to make a positive difference in the world, Chanel Rose and her team at CR Agency have the expertise and drive to help you succeed. With her at the helm, you'll have the confidence, charming guide to navigate today's fast-paced business landscape and achieve your goals. This is going to be an amazing conversation with your wealth of experience, your background. I'm so thrilled that you're joining me today.
Thank you so much. Whenever I hear my bio, I'm like, wow, that's me. I've been busy.
Yes, you have. So, is there anything that I missed?
Oh, well, my favorite thing. I stop everything I do and tell people that I'm from Chicago. That's the only thing that's not in that bio. That is, that's probably my favorite thing. If you would have asked me, the running joke is like, it's God, Chicago, and everything else, right? Like when you're from here, it is very much so. How do you describe your personality? Chicago. And I mean that as a joke, but mostly that is the quickest way to describe my background in the most succinct manner. The only other thing it doesn't mention is, that I'm from here.
That's awesome. Proud of where you are, or proud of where you're from, and who you've, really how that's built you up to be, who you are. And I think it's important to mention you are, and I don't know where I read this, but third generation or fourth generation entrepreneur.
I am. Yeah.
Yes.
It's in my blood. It's in my roots. I guess the family started in farming, and up until the late 90s, we had a lumber farm. And then my grandfather him and his cousin started a transportation logistics company that grew into both fleet and logistics. And then that generation, so like my mom's generation, are in the transportation industry. And then me, right? I'm an entrepreneur. I do business development and sales. So if you would have asked me how I got here, I fought it. There was so much friction for me around landing in entrepreneurship and sales. I thought that when I got hired in corporate America after working in campaigns and fundraising for so long, that corporate America was my great hope. It was my white picket fence. And even in corporate America, I was in sales. And when I got fired in the pandemic, no less, as a top performer, I had to figure it out. And even in the beginning of that, I ran away from who I was meant to be. And when I finally owned the fact that business development and sales, at the core, all I do is revenue generation. No matter where I'm at in any business, it lands itself smack dab on the money side. And so even when I was a kid, I remember my grandfather, one of my favorite memories about him is we would be on the expressway. And, in the 80s and 90s, there were no cell phones. They just barely had PCs, so personal computers, right? Like that's how long ago this was. And we would be on the expressway and he had a notepad and a pen and he'd have me in the car and he'd say, remember this phone number from this company? And I'd have to like memorize the number and like give it back to him. And I'd run in the office, type it in, and he'd call him, right? Like he was definitely an action taker.
Right.
And I mean, I saw all sides of the business, but my two favorite parts were making the money and the payroll, right? So like providing, commission for folks, and a lot of them just a lifestyle they would have otherwise not been afforded had they have not been working for my family's company. And so to sit here today, starting that same type of business, right? Like sales leaning, but just only the part that I really enjoy, it feels the most natural.
Right. And there's a couple of things that you mentioned in there. One, being fired as a top producer, it's a hard pill to swallow, but so many people experienced that during the pandemic. I mean, the pandemic shook the core of many people's, lives and homes. And then to, fight that, because I very similar, like I was told to follow that path. Corporate America, don't try to do the entrepreneur thing. I mean, it was that's a lot of people found themselves in that boat. So, first I commend you for being able to finally recognize your brilliance, despite the fact that I can't imagine that was a good time for you being fired. I mean, it's not easy.
So here's the weird thing, and it's kind of a hard dynamic to really dig into. So I was a top performer. I hated my job. I was miserable. I was boxed in, ignored, not, recognized as a number, but not as a person, and company wide. And I feel like I had outgrew my role for a long time. And part of the reason why I was unable to advance is because I was doing so well, right? Like I was for the good of the team. And so when it came time to ask, can I get transferred? A lot of times people would get hired within the firm and they would say, oh, we need 6 months before we can let them go. And the rest of the company would say, well, we don't have 6 months, 6 months. We have 6 weeks, maybe 2 months. And so many people, it would be like, well, if I quit, then I can't get hired, right? Because there's like all this stuff, this red tape. And so when I got fired, I mean, I knew, right? So on a Thursday, I was on medical leave. The whole thing is messed up, but really quickly, I was on medical leave, had medical leave approved. This woman from HR calls me and says, oh, well, you're on unapproved leave. And I was like, no, I have documentation that my leave has been approved. She's like, no, well, we looked, and the person who authorized you to go on medical leave is not somebody who actually can't authorize you to go on medical leave. I was like, but I did all the things. I did the things. And so essentially on a Thursday, she said, well, you have until Monday to come back. And I said, okay. And then she told me on Monday, I sat down, I said, what can I do? I started with Airbnb. right? Like an Airbnb is a marketing platform. I lived in a great place, and I had from Thursday to Monday to figure it out. I used all my money down to 4 cents to pivot into Airbnb, and grew to 6 figures in like 10 months, less than 10 months, and grew that to multiple 6 figures in 2 years. And it started, like, I wish I could tell you that, unfortunately, let me frame this a little differently. It started from survival mode, right? Like, it was a pandemic. And really, I was like, well, not even, people are just dying everywhere. And this might be the only time in my life that I'll ever get the chance to believe in myself. I'll ever get the chance to trust myself. And my timing is terrible, but I don't know when the time, right, would be right. Like, when does it come? How do I know it? Does it show up in a certified messenger with a letter with my name on it? Like, and I just felt like, well, all these other impossible things, like, you couldn't have told me that, there would be the things that happened in 2020 and like in that time. And I mean, I was on medical leave. I couldn't work anyway. And back against the wall, I literally just used what I had. And like, at the core of sales and starting your business and entrepreneurship, I wasn't good at Airbnb. I know anything about Airbnb. I have my investment licenses, so I wasn't even really on social media, right? I'm intelligent though. I worked in politics for a long time. So when you work on campaigns and you win campaigns, you know how to successfully create strategy. And I mean, my goal was just initially, I just didn't want to be homeless. I didn't want to get evicted. I didn't understand like the rent moratorium thing. And it was just so much at once, right? And so when that salesperson kicked in, it was like, oh, I could just sell what I have. Well, what do I have that I can sell? This place that I live in. And I mean, again, going back into default mode, right? The road most traveled. I know people say it's the road least traveled, but it's the road most traveled, right? It led me where I needed to be.
Right. And now I want to go back to something else you said initially. You had that experience with your grandfather, because I love the story about being in the car with your grandfather. So I want to pull that out for a second, because I too grew up in a sales family, not, I don't have those types of, I had real estate parents in real estate.
Oh, okay.
So sitting at the dinner table and talking about this deal, and you could always tell the mood in the room when they would walk in. It was like, uh-oh, something's falling apart right now. But the story of your grandpa sitting in the car and having that, because I remember, the 80s, the 90s, you didn't have a cell phone where you're like, oh, okay, let's quickly call this.
Yeah.
Sales have changed so much, but let's talk about what hasn't. It's that drive that you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's telling you to write down that number, and it's the actions that come next, right?
Yeah.
It's that, write it down, go back, because you don't have a cell phone. You're going back into the office.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm going to guess, this ingrained, I guess it's almost like a muscle movement that you learned from what I think you referenced at one point, like eighth grade, ninth grade, where you were already learning this muscle movement.
Yeah.
Of this is how it works.
Yeah. And so I want to make sure I highlight my grandmother, because my grandfather's cool, but like, my grandmother is really the star of the show. So as a kid, my grandmother was the executive director of a nonprofit and a grant writer. And so I think I learned my hardcore sales, get in the room, don't take no for an answer, negotiation strategies from, my grandfather's just blind belief that he deserved everything that he wanted. But my grandmother was an executive director. She was, a standout leader. She has her master's degree. I don't know many women today in their 70s that have a master's degree, right? She has a master's degree. At the time, she was going to University of Illinois here in Chicago. It was one of the best social work programs in the country, right? So here my grandmother was, this, 4-time single mother, originally from East St. Louis, Illinois, had moved to the South, had been in Omaha, Nebraska, and made it to Chicago, big old Chicago, small town girl, made it to big old Chicago, and she was at the helm. She was the boss. And, in her office, there were so many different types of people. Like, this was diversity before diversity was diversity. Like, she just believed in talent. And that for me is probably the strongest foundation. And like, when times get hard, I have the grit. I can make the calls, I can do the emails, but like, you burn out, right? So my longevity strategy is relationships. It is, she was a grant writer. I was writing grants in high school, and I remember getting a commission from my grandfather, from like, if I would help him figure out how to close deals with people, or I would make the calls, leave the messages, and they would call back, and I would answer calls at the office. But like, with my grandmother, my grandmother had this white collar role. And I just remember, watching her write grants, like multi-million-dollar grants, and getting them, and, giving people raises, and, in a community. I always say, like, she took them from the basement of a church in the projects to a high rise in downtown Chicago. Like, that is what her discipline, consistency, relationship understanding. And back then, remember, like, if you were getting grants, right, either you had to know somebody who was writing the grants, or you had to like go to these meetings and go get this list and print it out and bind it and do all these things. And she's doing this because when you're the executive director, you are also the salesperson and responsible for fundraising and funding, right?
Right.
Well, you're simultaneously dealing with the fallout of the crack 80s and the gang 90s here in Chicago, and you still have to provide the highest quality services while doing this work. And go ahead.
So I just want to, so we're talking about writing a grant during a time. Now, this was in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
So during a time when we're not sitting down and emailing this, we're talking about the old days, typewriter,
yes.
binding it, hand delivering it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking this was not, and I remember when I had to, and this was, I'm dating myself, but when I had to write just a proposal, and then we went and had to bind it. And I mean, that's a process.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you talk, so when people see me, and I'm so passionate about sales, and shameless plug, if you see me on LinkedIn, I'm always telling people, like, sell your products, sell your services, tell people what you offer, articulate your value. And it's literally because, I watched, like my grandfather, who was this, I talk about legacy a lot, but just to help people understand, he was from the South. He had an absolutely awful, terrible, not even suitable for TV childhood. And for him to grow from that into the successful entrepreneur who had multiple offices, like we're talking about like real deal two offices in Chicago, an office in Atlanta, 2 offices in Charlotte, an office in Alabama. This all like came from monetizing an idea, like somebody who decided to believe in themselves. And so as an entrepreneur today, I mean, certainly, I guess you probably could do things on a typewriter, but I would argue that I think the crushing back then was finding opportunities, right? Like trying to find a room to get into, needing to know somebody and know somebody and know somebody at a conference that's coming up.
Right. And
in 2024, I feel like there is information overload, right? Like I tell my clients all the time, you go on LinkedIn, because I'm a firm believer in that any business can find business on LinkedIn. And so I think about like those trucks passing by, and when you're on the interstate, it's hundreds of them, right? Which one is it? You got to find one, pick one, get the number, right?
Right.
The internet, our scroll feed is very similar to that. And I think the reason why I don't find it intimidating is probably from those same lessons I learned, from him and from my grandmother, is that like, you got to know. So he would go to truck stops, right? Eventually we would do, we would ride on the expressway a lot, but we would go to truck stops, right? Like get in front of your people. So if you're an entrepreneur getting started, find your truck stop, find your people, right? Because really quickly, unique thing about truck stops, I don't work for one, I'm not advocating hanging out at truck stops, but this is even playing field, right? It's the same thing with politics. You can apply this in any business, right? You're looking for people who have what you have, who can give you real-time information, who can provide you with resources that otherwise wouldn't be available. the truck stop, right? So yeah, we were out on the expressway sometimes, right? A lot because we were out doing things, but we would also go to different truck stops because he knew that, and eventually he got so good at it, he knew based on the type of parcel, the time of day they may be either gassing up, like taking a break. And so he would pick different ones because he would know which routes they would go on, right? And you have to be that intentional about your business, right? So like an example of this would be like Facebook, right? Like maybe a lot of people say you get on every platform, try every platform. Maybe I tried that, right? But if you get really good at one platform, right, and that becomes your metaphorical route, right, and then you create your truck stop, which is your page and your community, then you can duplicate that process over and over again. But a lot of people are just like, we would do the highway thing, right? But that's like that quick cash, that fidget spinner thing. And it worked, right? We would do that. And those memories are there. But I also remember we would drive around the truck stop and he would write down a business name. And if he saw the trucker, he would get their information because we offered employment for truck drivers, right? And so then it would be like, oh, well, you can come work for us on the side. Yeah. So the business grew from just like literally finding his truck stop, if that makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. It completely makes sense. And Chanel, this is so wildly interesting because you bring so much together because over the years, sales has changed. It's changed in a sense of, obviously during the pandemic, we weren't going to in-person networking meetings anymore, right? You're no longer being able to get in front of the people that you would create those long-term relationships with. And I remember the days where I'm knocking on doors. I'm driving through business parks, knocking on doors saying, "Hey, I'm here. I'd like to drop off some information, try to gather the information, get past the gatekeeper." That all went away. I never from, when I left corporate America, it was, shortly after, well, I worked for a little while in corporate America after the pandemic, but even after that, businesses just started locking their doors and never unlocked them.
Yeah.
And it became, okay, how do I find my truck stop? How do I find my audience? And I preach that, and I'm sure you do to your clients all the time of, well, do you know where your audience hangs out? Have you even created your ideal audience? Have you even figured out who they are? And once you do that, figure out where they hang out, because it's not as simple as just driving to a truck stop these days and being able to go, okay, here's all of the business names. And depending on the industry, obviously, then, you have to shift in.
Right.
But that metaphor is beautiful because it's truly, if you understand it, that is how you would implement that in almost any business. Real estate.
Yeah.
I mean, print, magazine, and I think you referenced a couple of different industries that you've been, newspaper subscriptions, magazine ad space. I've also sold magazine ad space.
Yeah.
How do you find those people and figure out how to get in front of them? On a mass scale, if you're looking for that, is that a trade show that they all go to that would be interested in the magazine? And then obviously sprinkling in cold calling. There are those who believe cold calling is dead. I'm not one.
It's not.
You at a very young age figured out, wow, okay, this is how my grandpa gets in front of his audience, because that is the only way that you could at that time, right?
Wow.
I mean, network meetings weren't booming at that.
Not in transportation. Not for, at the time, it was him and his cousin. He lived in Atlanta. The office was in Chicago. They had an office in Charlotte. My thing is always like ABT, always be testing. ABT all the time, right? And so if you're looking to get in front of your audience, I think in the beginning, people tell you to niche down. And so my concern about niching is that there's no aerial view in niching, right? If you're trying to niching down, it's like the opposite end of a funnel, right? So like typically a funnel is, the big, little, right? And I think if you try to start at your niche, it's this very laser view into trying to cast a wide net. And that doesn't promote, I mean, quite frankly, it doesn't promote confidence. It doesn't promote flexibility. And part of being a leader, right? If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you need to know that you're a leader. Even if you're a party of one, you have to lead. You have to lead yourself to your desk when you don't want to. You have to lead yourself away from wanting to say comments to people who are not very kind to you, right? And so I always recommend when you're getting started, which of your talents or skills do you want to use to make other people's lives better, have less risk, make more money? Whatever what you do provides to a business, I always say it's two things: either you're making money or managing risk. You got to fall in one bucket, right? And ultimately, whatever you're doing to help them manage risk, in turn, should buy them back some time, and in turn, show up on their bottom line. But either you're like straight up sales or you're straight up service. But if you're in the service industry, it's almost always, again, going back to either sales or managing risk. And so I think in the beginning, talking to people, like, data is, listen, it's cash flow. Because in the beginning, and I'm not talking about just like market research Zooms. I think people are a little worn out on those. I mean, it's literally asking people. I do a poll on LinkedIn at least once a week. And I ask anything. I ask people, like, what day of the week should I have an event? Where should I go? Like, what time of day should it be? And I'm getting votes, and I'm making sure that the people who I would want to come to my event are responding to my posts. And if they aren't, I'm DMing them. I'm asking questions. I think that so often people talk to you and they tell you to post, right? So you made it to this point, you're in the podcast, you're like, well, she didn't say post. Well, here's the thing: post. Congratulations. But if you post, a lot of times that's not where the engagement really happens. It's a relationship. Sales is a relationship. So could you imagine being in a relationship with a guy or a girl, or, you know, just a non-binary person, and you were never able to speak? All they would do was talk. That would be exhausting. That's the equivalent of you just posting and not talking to people. So I will post, and then I spend at least an hour a day. I know they say 15 minutes, but I spend at least an hour a day, off and on, all day on LinkedIn, commenting on other people's stuff. And like, I'm all over, and not just people who I'm connected with. I look up my keywords, right? So I'll look up leadership development. I will look up sales. I'll look up training. I'll look up employee resource groups. I'll look up insurance sales or real estate sales or whatever, right? And I look up posts within like the last week. This is my secret sauce. So hopefully y'all will pay attention, right? And then I start commenting on people's stuff, and almost always, right, they will come and look and see my page. So now my page, after I made my post, is going to get more looks, it's going to get more impressions, and it'll promote more engagement. And in case you missed it, get off your front porch and go out and talk to people. So yes, keep your lights on in your house, but go see your neighbors. I think that's too important, and we miss that, especially in sales.
I love that. Get off your front porch, but leave your lights on. That is absolutely, you know, and when I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, they're like, I don't even know where to begin. And I'm like, well, where do your people hang out? And they're like, well, but I don't get out a lot. And I'm like, no, that's not what I mean. I'm like, when was the last time you looked up a hashtag on LinkedIn or on Facebook to see what is happening on that page? You know, you need to utilize not only those hashtags, but you need to go and see what is happening over there. Like, if you utilize a hashtag that you think is cool, but there's only, 400 people following that may not be where you want to go. You need to look for like the, 2.5K or the 100K or the, and then see who's there, and then see what they're posting and engage with them and actually put an effort in. And they go, oh, I'm like, if nobody is posting or nobody is responding to your posts, you need to switch it up. Like, just because you post doesn't mean people will come. This is the whole, like, if you build it, they will come. No, I'm sorry, that it doesn't work that way. Like, Right. You actually have to actually engage in the audience to get them to engage back, to get them to go back to your page, to view you, to find interest, to and that is the thing where people assume like, well, if I go out and post, people will read it and they'll like it. No. No, they won't.
No, not only will they not, I think that the other demystification, if you will, I like to implore people to do is that if you're using Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter,
Yep.
I need you to start a new page. Here's why. If you're on Facebook, first of all, marketing on Facebook without starting a new page is hustling backwards, because you're going to be like, oh, let me post. Oh, look at my niece. She's so cute. Oh my God, the neighbor's dog died. What is this terrible recipe? And now you 45 minutes in, right? And you wedged it between the girl from high school who has polarizing views, and underneath there's some other drama that is none of your business. And you're 3 hours into a doom scroll, and none of these people who you want to work with. Right. And also, it is a self-defeating action to try to sell in front of your friends and family for two reasons. One, they're not your target audience, right? And two, they're not going to support you, right? Because they aren't your target audience. But for some reason, we expect for our family to repost our stuff, comment on every post. And then, like, quite frankly, do you want your mother to be the only person posting on your business post? Because that's what's going to happen.
It's great. Like, and it's awesome that, you get some likes, but it means nothing. And somebody once said to me, if you want to win a popularity contest, that's great. Go and post on your personal Facebook page. Your friends and family will go and say, oh, that's really great. I'm happy for you. But we're not here to win a popularity contest, period. Mm-mm. And somebody once said that to me and I went, oh, right. And so they actually, and this was a long time ago, they're like, if you have a TikTok page that was dedicated to something unrelated to your business, shut it down and restart it, because all of your followers, they're following you for something totally different. You need to start it for the business and find the people you want to follow you. And I went, oh, that makes sense.
Leighann, today, I would argue that today. And I would even go further to say, like, so like in my business, I was going to name it like Chanel Rose. And then I was like, man, if I ever sell my business, I have to sell the rights to my name, right? And so then, I do public speaking, I do all types of trainings, and I've licensed my work to people. And the impact of that, like, I mean, obviously, I'm manifesting selling my business, but even from the beginning, I thought to myself, sales focused, this is not what I want. In that same vein, I would have to turn over all the intellectual property of the business at sales. And so if my brand is Hello Chanel Rose, right? And I'm marketing my business under Hello Chanel Rose, I have to turn over Hello Chanel Rose to the company. And so a lot of what I've been working on is stepping away from being the face of the business, being the spokesperson and not the product, right? And my pages now, I could care less if I have to let them go today, right? And the important thing I know is that when I started to sell a product, it got a lot easier. The problem for me a lot was I didn't want to be the face, right? Because selling stuff makes you so much money than selling yourself. Like, I use this example, Kim Kardashian, right? I know you're about to say something really quick, like Kim Kardashian, right? So when Kim Kardashian was Kim Kardashian, she was doing club walkthroughs and sitting front row at Fashion Week. And by all means, listen, that is not a bad way to live. But you know why she's a billionaire? Her cosmetics company and her skincare and the game. And I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other stuff. And I'm obviously not here. She's not paying me. But what I'm trying to articulate is that promoting things, right, made her so much money, more money than her being in the room. Right.
And that, and to your point, is that an entrepreneur who understands that, like, yes, they in the beginning are the face, but in order for you to scale and become more of that, you have to be willing to step back and allow it to grow beyond you. if you are an entrepreneur who is too self-centered to be able to step back and let that animal or that morph beyond you, you're never going to be able to scale. If you want to continue to always hold on to that and have it all be about you, and there are some entrepreneurs who want to keep it small. They want to be 100% the face. They want to be that person who's the business. They want to sell themselves. Unfortunately, they're not going to be able to scale. In order to scale, you have to be able to take a back seat and allow others to step in eventually and become more than what you are. And that's also the most successful people understand that they have to hire other people to do what they can't do, and level them up to be to stay in their area of genius. Chanel, your area of genius is sales. Now I'm going to guess that, and I shouldn't guess. Mine, I'm going to just point out mine instead. Accounting is not my thing. In order for me to really grow and have somebody sit down and go, okay, here's what your numbers mean. I have to have somebody sit next to me and go, here's what your numbers mean. Here's what all of this stuff, because I know that's not my working genius.
I agree. And you have to stay in your lane, right? Like,
yes.
I know people always say, like, you have to take, I see a lot now about taking the road less traveled, and you got to have some losses to have some wins. And there's like all this fluffy crap about sales out there. And the reality of it is that, like, lean into what you do well and let other people lean into what they do well and find some synergy, right?
Yes.
Like, find some synergy around how you all can promote one another, how you all can help one another. And like, for me, I'm not good with technology. And so I really want to grow an agency for people to, like, do their CRM stuff, and especially for solopreneurs. It's like a one-stop shop. And my biggest concern is that I'm not a tech person. So I don't want to fiddle with the things that don't work. I don't want to answer tech questions. I want to be able to, like, sell the product. And so what I've been working on lately, right? Because, you iterate. We didn't talk about that very much here, but, like, you, as an entrepreneur, you iterate. Like, where you start is usually not where you end. That's Jeff Bezos started off selling discount books. Hello. Here we are, 20, 30 years later. And I mean, I imagine Amazon still sells books. I couldn't tell you. They have a Kindle, right? But that is not their primary source of revenue. But the thing about him and how you can be in your business is just get smarter and smarter at what's working. Get smarter and smarter about what the base needs are. Get smarter and smarter about how you can deliver it better, faster, smarter. And ABT, always be testing.
Right. And that goes back to the book Good to Great, where, and I don't know if you've read Good to Great, but they really do, they really studied businesses, and the businesses that really, with, the people who were running the businesses were they were not focused on the arrogance of them being great. They were focused on the businesses being great and really honing in on what the business itself did great. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole point. That's how you scale. That's how you become, the ones that thrive, the ones that do become sellable, from that single entrepreneur who had a great idea and decided, I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to give a shot and see, what happens. And, there is a great deal of, it's a fine line between somebody who can be an entrepreneur, because there is a little bit of arrogance in us. Sure. Because we're like, yeah, I can do this better than anybody else. Yet in order for us to truly succeed, we have to have the humility.
Yeah. Yeah. Flexible leadership is something I talk about all the time. So especially when I talk to women, I try not to talk about humility and being humble and know, like, and trust. And the reason why is that it's been stuffed down our throat. I've never seen a podcast, TV show, or anything geared towards men and masculinity that tells them don't buy coffee. Listen, if coffee and a vacation is stopping you from buying a house, coffee and a vacation is not what's stopping you from buying a house, right? Because we're talking about, and I read this somewhere years ago, and it was like, if you stop buying like $20 a week is what, $80 a month, which ends up being like $1,000 a year. If you need $20,000 to save for a house, it would take you 20 years. And listen, I'm not a mathematician, so nobody correct me, but whatever, right? The point is that, like, if all you're doing is saving $20 a week to get you towards a house, babe, just rent, right? Luxury rentals exist. Billionaires rent all the time, right? Like, don't let somebody else's idea of the white picket fist and the dream trick you into thinking that success has to happen one way. We're not monolithic. And the same thing, like inside of your business, as soon as you can, invest in other people. As often as you can, invest in other people. As fast as you can, offload tasks. Because ultimately the goal, the biggest, best companies in the world, they have figureheads, right? Like, there's no scenario where, pick a CEO. They're like, how much does a janitor make in the building? I mean, from a perspective standpoint, they might know, but they're not going to be like, oh, that's Leighann, right? Me and you gonna both be janitors. Leighann makes $1.12 an hour, and Chanel makes $1.12.2 because she's been there a week longer, right? No, right? Like, you have to be the spokesperson. You have to be, a focused, flexible leader. And that flexibility comes from confidence. And I know I'm confident the more people I work with, right? Yes. Because I'm constantly being able to basically, for layman's terms, right, a factory, right? So I'm excellent at what I do. You're excellent at what you do. I'm not coming over to tire manufacturing when I'm on handles, right? And if I do, it's going to take me a long time. I'm going to have to start from the training and go through. You can't do that in your business. You cannot get excellent at everything. You won't ever go to market.
Absolutely. And this conversation has been amazing. And we've actually, I can't believe how much time has gone by. So I want to, your grandmother is, I didn't get a chance to say, it is amazing. The time period in which she was living in, to have a master's, did you say master's degree? Mm-hmm. That is it is phenomenal. I love to hear about powerful women having powerful roles. So that is awesome. I want to give you your 30-second shameless pitch before we wrap up.
Okay. Well, again, my name is Chanel Rose. If you are looking to pivot into a profitable business, I'm your girl. I help high achieving freedom seekers start businesses so that they have a soft landing into entrepreneurship. I'm not somebody who's going to tell you to quit your job. I believe in duality, so you can be excellent for Google and excellent in your own company. Most of my clients are typically mid-career, looking to leverage what they know and turn it into a profitable business. So if that sounds like you, definitely reach out. I'd love to help you. I'd love for you to be my next $1 million story.
That's awesome. And Chanel, you are clearly a very powerful woman following in your family footsteps. So thank you so much for joining me. This has been just a fabulous conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It has been so fun. It went by so fast.
Yeah, it always does when we're having a great conversation. So
I agree.
This podcast is sponsored by Sales Rescue. Ready to revolutionize your sales strategy? Sales Rescue is here to transform your business's approach with proven success. At RescueMySales.com, we turn the frustration of missed targets into the thrill of exceeding goals, empowering you to meet and surpass your sales ambitions, leading to growth and profitability. Exclusively for Love Your Sales listeners, claim your free sales consultation today and receive our Sales Rescue AI playbook. Start your journey with sales excellence now. But hurry, this free offer is only available for a limited time. Visit RescueMySales.com now. That's RescueMySales.com. Don't miss this free opportunity at Sales Rescue, where we rescue your sales so you love your profits.
Thanks for joining us for Love Your Sales. For more, connect with Leighann on LinkedIn and be sure to subscribe to the show and leave us a rating and review. We'd love to hear what you think. Looking for a way to take your sales process to the next level? Visit us at loveyoursales.com to find out more about how Leighann can take your organization to new revenue heights. And be sure to join us next time for more great ways to love your customers so they love your sales.